guess, ramble for 30 minutes on slides that I prepared. My main focus was providing some introspection in my journey, getting a PhD, learning and teaching others, and becoming, I guess, a prolific teacher because I created online open courseware that I gave away for free and it's been used at over a dozen universities by tens of thousands of students. Very technical topics.
Yeah, the forward doesn't want to work. You have to use the arrow on the keyboard for some reason.
Okay. All right. So, brief outline. We're going to go over how I got here, the lessons learned along the way, the main point of the talk, learning how to learn, and some new paradigms to consider for an education system that has largely been trapped in the Industrial Revolution era. So 25 years ago, I was a problem child. This is not a picture of me, but at some point, my parents did have me on a leash in Disney World. I was super hyper. I would run off and chase shiny objects. And I couldn't sit down and focus and get almost any work done throughout all my middle school and high school. My parents would always tell me, and others, the joke that insanity is hereditary. You get it from your kids. And today, I'm, I guess, a renowned hacker, researcher, entrepreneur, teacher. I get away dressing like that. I'm finishing my PhD in 5 weeks. My dissertation is titled Cyber Physical Systems, Vulnerability Research and Sandboxing. I'm also a government advisor for DARPA, and all of the opinions and everything in this talk are not the opinions of the U.S. government, DARPA, Department of Defense, or anything like that. So I advised them on a recent project that just came about involving critical infrastructure and cybersecurity. I'm not going to talk more about it today. I created this as a hobby kind of course I taught my fellow students at FSU and released it online. It became open courseware and blew up, and now people tell me I'm a prolific cybersecurity teacher. The course name is Offensive Computer Security. I'll talk more about it later. I'm also a small business owner. Try to do cybersecurity training, reaching out to academia with the goal of the company is to create more open courseware, but also to charge money to academia, to industry that wants hands-on treatment. So when I was growing up, my parents hated computers. They hated seeing me spending time in front of them. They wanted me to be going outside, playing football, playing sports, doing anything but sitting there and wasting away. They saw computers as the same as watching TV. It's just mindless. And I preferred video games way more than homework. It was the only thing that they observed that I would actually sit down and focus to do is play video games, and I could do it for hours on end. And parents refused to let me have the latest console, so me and my brother ran away down the street to our friend's house and played them there. When we couldn't, I'm a nerd, I would play D&D, D20 games, Dice, Dungeons & Dragons, Macross, Tech. But probably the first real time I got my hands wet doing actually productive work with computers was my parents sent me when I was in high school to a programming summer camp for video game programming, and I was addicted immediately. And after that, I took 2 AP courses, C++ and Java in high school, and learning to program in a new language is a very interesting experience. If you haven't done it, it's hard to convey what it entails. Because you're learning how to create something that makes the computer do something that you want, which, if you are good at it, has very profound power and instills the student or the programmer with awesome capabilities. I taught my brother to program when he was finishing his undergraduate thesis, and he was doing work in photochemistry that was disproving work that had been cited for 30 years, as this is how this reaction occurs. It rotates this way, when you shine light on it. He found out that it said rotates this way. I forget the technical term, someone could probably tell me it, It involved doing manual correction on thousands of lines of data, which had to be programmed, right? And so we did that, got published in the top journal, and it was an incredible, empowering event for him. So after high school, I went to Georgia Tech for a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science, and went from knowing a few programming languages to becoming a true programmer, which everyone says is someone who can get the job done regardless of the language. They understand the fundamentals, they can pick up the language along the way, and they can get it done. That's true to an extent in my experience. However, you miss out some nuances like how to do it securely and do it bug-free, which cybersecurity and vulnerabilities is a huge issue today. So we were first taught the fundamentals and the basic courses at Georgia Tech, and then throughout the rest of the curriculum, they would routinely ask us to learn and produce more than what we were taught. We were just given some bare resources and always demanded to produce more. And it was a common theme throughout, I'm sorry, it's cut off, throughout the entire curriculum. And for me, that was a valuable journey in hindsight. I hated it along the way. I always complained about my teachers, this and that. I was somewhat of an ungrateful student, I will admit. But it's a process that taught me to accept unknowns when I'm trying to solve a larger puzzle, solve what I can one at a time and keep moving forward. To also piece things together loosely, be flexible, but also still be scientific. And it made me comfortable thinking about my own thought process and shortcoming. Maybe I should go back and learn this because I'm clearly not getting it here. And it was perhaps most routinely done in a weed-out class at Georgia Tech. It was a 2000 level class where all they do every week in the lecture, they sit down and talk to you about how to work together in various programming, team programming paradigms, like Agile, Waterfall, Scrum, etc. And they would then say, for this week's project, go learn these resources, and they just give you links. And so you have to go, you're randomly assigned a team member, and then you have to go learn together how the things you need to get the job done, which really sucked at the time. But in hindsight, that's really how the real world works. And so it was really valuable for preparing people for the job market. And they've improved that now, after I've left the course, in the computer architecture class, where they teach the fundamentals of how a processor works, how the AND gates, the NAND gates, all the little gates, the ALU, the little components that make up the processor, how they all work. They use that by having the term project be build the game board from scratch, which is an awesome project because it's now fun. The follow-up project is now program a game for it. So it all comes back to fun and games now, which I wish I had the chance to do that. So after that, I went to grad school, and the other story I'd like to provide introspection on in my academic journey is doing research. Academic research, you have to expand the cutting edge of human knowledge, and you get peer-reviewed and published and provide actually useful work. My research professor advised that I get into trust management research because it aligned with my interests in cybersecurity at the time. And essentially, it all boiled down to, you have this network with resources, say you have social security numbers, and you have various sensors on the network, like intrusion detection systems. The policies that we came up with and published essentially involved a system that, depending on the various threat levels you would guess based on the intrusion detection systems on the network, you would have different policies for access. If it looks like there's a massive attack going on, you block down the social security number database, right? Makes sense. And so I spent months doing research. All the other people in the field that were publishing had very similar models. And after, I don't know, about a year of hard work on this, there was just like glaring flaws that I discovered, that anyone could just maliciously toy with the sensors to deny service to the whole network, right? Just send off false positives, all sorts of not actual attacks. You lock down the whole system, you use it against itself. So I took a huge step back because I just felt like I wasted like a year of my life. This was a glaring, obvious problem with this work and this entire field. And anyone who's done like academic research, like at the PhD level, understands that you take it very personally when your work, has problems. It's a very kind of intimate reflection of your own thought process, your ability to come to conclusions, your ability to investigate things, and it reveals whatever biases you may have, and flaws, and shortcomings, etc. So I took several steps back, and I tried to investigate why I came to this problem. And
Sure, absolutely.
so this is a point where I started thinking about my own thinking, which is a term that other people call metacognition. It's something I'll bring up again later. And I concluded that after a lot of Googling that I don't actually know much about hacking at the time, despite my job in my research is to keep the hackers out. And that's a common problem in cybersecurity education that most people don't know. Not almost all, the vast majority of college cybersecurity courses teach pure defense. So they don't teach you any offense because sometimes there's ethical issues. You don't want to create a student who causes problems, right? And that's what almost every university that approaches this subject has a problem with, the ethics of the issue. And so I sat down and started teaching myself, mapping out the resources I needed to learn to get good at hacking, because it is, for this form of research, it is the analytical tool that measures the efficacy of the defense. The defense is measured by whether or not the attackers get in. And there is a very good quote by, I forget his name, Bruce Schneier, that anyone can design a system that they can't break into. And that hit me at the same time. And he goes on to say that people who create good systems have a lot of experience breaking into systems because they know the common patterns in which things go wrong, they fail, they crash, and attackers get in. They also work together with like-minded people who have done that, so there's a consensus of these are the common offensive techniques that we need to defend against. Versus here are the defensive paradigms that you learned back in this year from your security class. Cybersecurity is the fastest moving field, so static skill sets are obsoleted very quickly. So it was interesting because I had a lot of homework to do at the time to catch up in this regard, to become a hacker. And it's much more different doing it when it's for yourself and not for a grade or a deadline. And that's the point at which many students fall short, they give up. It's hard to encourage that. And wish I could provide more valuable discussion on that, but that's all I got for that. So I started hacking legal challenges that are called war games and capture the flag games, and these are challenges set up by other people with explicit permission that you can do whatever you want to these systems, or you can download them, set them up on your own system, and just do them locally to no one's detriment or concern. And so I started posting some from my own friends, and it's a great real-world feedback loop because I can take this system that has some defenses, and if I can break into it with the tools and techniques that I just learned, then I can actually do it in real-world settings. And so after hosting my own challenges, I started the security club at FSU, and it's now 100 plus people, and I started, I think, 2010. And started hosting bi-weekly workshops and teaching people the things I was learning along the way, and this grew into a class. And I was constantly learning and sharing with others. And nope. We'll just go back. I remember what I wrote on the slide, I think. Jump ahead. So, the point that's cut off is that learning a topic to the point that you can teach others to actually do it is what I call the highest bar that you can strive for in terms of mastery of the subject. And that brings me to the class that I created, where it's popular because it's very hands-on and has real-world exercises. The main challenge, the main project of the course is you have to find a 0-day vulnerability and ethically disclose it. What that means is you have to find a new vulnerability in a target that no one has found yet. You have to prove it is exploitable, you have to communicate that to developers and they will patch it. So that is the exercise. The people who solve that exercise are assigned a CVE number, which they can put directly on their resume, which speaks higher for them than any grade, any course, or anything else, because it shows that they've actually made a positive contribution to the security community by getting an actual vulnerability that they discovered on their own fixed. And so that's probably the main reason it became so popular, on top of the fact that I videotaped every lecture, which again was very intimidating, and then I just dumped them all on YouTube. Not expecting people to really... I dumped them on Dropbox first, and then it kept crashing, so I moved it to YouTube, and it has 250,000 views or more right now. These are hour-and-a-half long plus lectures that are very technical. It's not cat videos. I held myself to a very high bar, and all of my mistakes were immortalized. I sometimes get messages every now and then making fun of things I said wrong in my lecture videos. I'm comfortable with that. And my research greatly benefited, my dissertation research greatly benefited from me going out and learning all this stuff and teaching and sharing with others, and others were inspired to do the same. And 2 other courses at FSU were spawned, similar to mine, reverse engineering course and offensive network security course. And today, another point got cut off is, at some point along the line, I switched my research focus from trust management to critical infrastructure cybersecurity. So I benefited from a lot of my friends being in that field, and so I was always keeping up with what they were looking at because they were sharing too. And so my dissertation title, or the paper title that I just recently got published, which is the final paper of my dissertation, is Simulated Physics and Embedded Virtualization Integration, which is a lot of buzzwords. Effectively, it's what we're doing for electric grid security and critical infrastructure security is a presentation of a methodology that's compared to physical test beds, where they spend 10, maybe $100+ million to buy power generator, power lines, transmission, transformers, all the actual physical grid equipment, and then the actual SCADA systems, the embedded systems that are controlling it, and then they're manually testing them. Problem is you can't pick that up and take it to a site that's getting attacked by a cyber attack. It's not portable, it's really hard to maintain, costly to maintain, and has a lot of other problems. You can't do a lot of malware, you can't do almost any malware analysis on it because you're risking breaking or, in other words, destroying the device or devices involved. And so my research has been, instead, getting away from that and taking an entire software-based approach. So simulated physics, we're using Department of Energy physics simulators that are for the electric grid, GridLab D. It's a $6 million project out of Pacific Northwest National Lab. It allows you to, at second level accuracy, simulate power flow of an entire arbitrary electric grid, from microgrid up to multiple interconnected grids. And then for the physics of each object, say a regulator, we then take the firmware from an actual embedded system that would be running that device. For my dissertation, I chose the Siemens variable step voltage regulator control panel called the MJXL series. And it was run by a processor that I've never used before. So I had to learn a new instruction set. But that's okay because I'm a really good reverse engineering programmer and good at computer architecture. And this is all stuff that I taught myself. And take the firmware, get it running, build a virtual machine for it, for which none existed at the time, and all of the inputs to it, that would be sensor inputs, say voltage sensor, current sensors, various things to trigger alarms like current trips, etc. Integrate those within the physics simulation so that those are all getting fed as inputs, and all the outputs from that device are signals to actuators. You say if it's a switch, open the switch, so it's cutting the connection, breaking the circuit, or if it's a regulator, for the one I'm doing, moving the taps of the regulator. It's been very hard work. I've been working pretty much 24/7 for months on it, and at the end of the day, the virtual machine development comes back to having CPU emulators for the target architectures, which I found, funnily enough, or humorously enough, to be very prevalent. It's getting cut off, unfortunately, in Maine, which is the Multiple Arcade Machine Emulator System. And they provide emulators for, I believe, over 1,500 different microarchitectures, which was perfect for what I was trying to promote and do. And so there's a lot more else to the research. I don't want to take up all the time we have, but this research got me connected with DARPA, and has been awesome. And it all comes back to video games, essentially. So the takeaways are really, don't mistake your kids having fun for developing ability skills or other experiences that have some intangible value down the line that you can't conceive or comprehend now. The world is very fast moving right now. And if you're lucky, they're learning how they explore and learn from scenarios best. Computers right now have a great advantage for learning because it allows students and children to experience more scenarios than they can perhaps go through in their real life. Puts them in interesting situations, and it's often a very useful, creative, and productive outlet. My parents would have never thought that all the years I spent glued to a computer or video game console right now would get me where I am today. There's a fourth point, and it's cut off. And oh well. So for the actual productive stuff, past introspection. There's two models for education, really, or rather, there's the Industrial Revolution model where you can get lectured at for 5 to 6 plus hours a day on various subjects. It's somewhat dehumanizing, and you go home, you do homework, and it's very static, and then you go off and get a job. High school should be good enough for you to get a job, right? You shouldn't need a bachelor's and a master's and a PhD. So, static skill sets lasted and got you a long way. Compared to today, we have many super fast-paced fields, and in-demand skill sets are rapidly changing, and that may increase even in the future, more so. College degrees may be insufficient. There's a problem with academic inflation, where the jobs of previous generations only took a high school degree, right? I talked about that. And so, in the Industrial Revolution, learning was often somewhat stopped overall in school. Literacy was valued over creativity, and creativity was assigned low value, or none, or punished for not being cookie cutter and falling in line. And the economy changed very slowly. Today's economy faces disruptive technologies that change perhaps the way we do business, the way we run businesses, the way we do everything. Every so often. The internet is perhaps the spark of all of that. And yeah, that's the reality of today. Disruptive technologies are commonplace. And people are often required to always be learning and improving. That's especially true for me in my field. Anyone going into computer science or cybersecurity should be able to learn more programming languages, should be able to learn more technologies, and learn about all the new security topics going on, pretty much happening every month. Creativity nowadays is assigned, well, at least in my world, a high value, and it's not, unfortunately, cultivated as well in schools as it should be. There's a good TED talk by Ken Robinson titled "Do Schools Kill Creativity?" That was true for me when I went through high school, but it's definitely getting better. So this is something I came up with. Maybe total BS, but it's something I think has some merit. It's first you have to develop students to have some form of intellectual self-awareness, which that means they have some experience with self-reflection of their thought process, and this is all going towards teaching them to have the ability to learn about subjects which they have little to zero experience or formal training in. Because that ability will allow them to adapt in the very disruptive world and economy job market that we have today. So crawl, walk, run. Intellectual self-awareness also involves having some ability to question authority, what you've been taught, because in my field, computer security, in some avenues, some subreddits, some news sites, the majority of the posts that you see, people just assume that the headline is fact. I find so many inaccuracies, people who get it wrong, and then this gets cited as canon. This is all fact. So having the ability to question authorities and question what you're taught and claims is very valuable. Identifying your own shortcomings, being prepared to be wrong and make mistakes. That's the big point that I'm going to come back to in a little bit. The next step is people who are capable of metacognition, which I, unprofessionally, I'm not a psychologist or I don't have a PhD in education. I would define as someone who has the ability to refine one's own thought process and also the ability to refine one's learning process. And that leads to finally someone who has the ability to learn about subjects in which they have little to zero formal education in, which an autodidact is someone who is self-taught. They can learn arbitrary subjects. Again, I'd like to add a personal note that if you teach kids that being wrong is the worst thing, which the modern education system, I believe, with standardized testing, if you do really poorly, you're failing, you're a bad student, and it's the worst thing. Being wrong is the worst thing, sorry, getting caught up. It's really damaging in the long term is what I'm trying to say. And the point of the picture is that it will keep a leash on them forever because it has a stifling effect on their creativity, their learning process, and their comfortableness with accepting that, that they've made a mistake in your ability to go get help from others. It has a punishing negative effect on the learning process. And so another paradigm I'd like to talk about with the last of my time is, has everyone heard of Khan Academy? And there's a good TED Talk, I won't spend too much time on, let's use the video to reinvent education. The talk is about tons of high school teachers that have contacted the Khan Academy founder, Solomon Khan, saying that they're flipping the lecture. They're assigning lecture videos for the homework, and they come to class and they do the exercises live. And this has a really interesting impact on the feedback loop of learning, where they do the exercise, they do the work, and they discover right away that they're wrong, versus they do the homework and then weeks later they get the grade back. And that allows for this Swiss cheese gaps in the knowledge foundation that you're trying to build in the student fester and develop. So that feedback loop helps fill in the gaps. It also makes the classroom and their experience more humanizing because, again, lecturing to kids for several hours straight without having any discussion, which I'm sure isn't really actually that commonplace. But the point is that spending the majority of the time just lecturing down to children can be very dehumanizing. It can stifle creativity and have other effects. So it also makes them comfortable asking for help because they're all doing it live, seeing that other people get it wrong too. In fact, they're seeing that everyone else gets it wrong at some point, which is a huge problem most people have in my field, and I guess in STEM fields in general with imposter syndrome, where they get hired or they get introduced to a new group of people and they must think these people are all geniuses, they get it right all the time. And I think it affects more people than we could possibly know. But that is it. The conclusion is kids need to be prepared to learn about topics in which they have no formal education in order to keep up. And today's world really favors those who can adapt and be creative. And my contact info is woredwood@gmail.com. Sorry I got that off. That's all I got. Hopefully I didn't go too much over time.